And so without further ado, I would not want to waste any more time. We are all itching and waiting to hear from you. Engineer Olowokere, you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lady K. Thank you, Mr. Boyede. It's actually indeed an honor for me to be here. It's a privilege that I cherish very much. And I want to thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts on some trade dynamics in the US. I applaud your efforts and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to share my screen so that the participants can also follow through as we go through the slides together. And I believe this is going to be a very informative material for everybody that decides to do business with the US. My name is Titus Olowokere from the US Africa Trade Council. I live in Atlanta here. I'm originally from Nigeria, and I've been privileged to meet a lot of immigrants, Nigerians, Africans, Chinese, Americans over the course of my career as an engineer and as a trade expert, as a trade consultant. Today, we're focusing on trading with the US, opportunities, regulations, and compliance, tips for entrepreneurs from developing countries. So as the theme suggests, we're going to break this down to 3 sections, which is trading with the US, the opportunities on one hand. We look at the regulations and compliance imperatives in the second phase, and we look at the tips for entrepreneurs from developing countries. Some tips are very obvious, some tips are behind the cloud, but we're going to take a little delve into these areas. But first of all, let's get some things out of the way. I don't work for the US government. I don't work for the Canadian government. I don't work for Nigeria. I'm an independent consultant. So every information we're sharing today is valid, but there is always dynamics of information. So over the next few days, information might change. Every business person, every exporter has a responsibility to be current with the information out there. Lack of knowledge for non-compliance is no excuse in the United States. So people have made mistakes, people have done things right, and to this extent, we are bridging the gap here. And finally, nothing in this presentation constitutes any legal advice or any client-consultant relationship, but we are going to have a dialogue together based on information we have now. But again, as you go further, every importer or exporter must do their due diligence to ensure they comply with the regulations at the time of their doing business. Okay, let's look at the opportunities for you for trading with the US. As many of us know, US is the biggest single trading nation in the world. And the indices confirm that. US has trade relations with over 200 countries around the world. US has over 5.6 trillion in exports of goods and services. Is the largest importer of goods in the world. And there's actually a cliche that if you have conquered the US in marketing your products, you have conquered the world. Because almost every company around the world, every company that matters has a representation in the US. So dealing with the US is like dealing with a subset of the world. So US is the #1 customer of companies in the world. Recently, we applaud the GDP of Nigeria to be $432 billion US. South Africa and Nigeria kind of go in and out. We was the largest GDP. The US has $20.93 trillion US as GDP. GDP, as we know, is the measure of the market size of a country, a measure of how well your goods can sell in that country. So US, again, comes out as the largest market in the world. Even beating Africa, the entire Africa, which is rated as about $2.6 trillion US. Now, someone might ask a question, if US has a 20 trillion GDP, why does it care about Africa with 2.6 trillion GDP? Why do we have this rush from China, from Russia, to do business in Africa is because Africa has the largest growth potential in the world today. In the next 5 years, Africa will have matured to the point of being able to buy anything from any country in the world. And that's why we have this scramble for Africa today. The potential is higher than any other country, any other continent. Now, US also is the largest exporter of goods in the world. Then last year is about 875 billion US dollars. It's the largest importer of services in the world. It's the second largest goods exporter in the world. You can guess who is the number one in this area. That's China. China is a major exporter of goods and services. They don't import as much as they export. A lot of people don't even export to China because they look more inwards. But not to digress, Africa, US is the second largest exporter of goods in the world today. But with these indices, we can see that US is the epicenter of world trade, is the fulcrum of world trade, is the place to do business. If you can master doing business with US and you conquer US, you have indeed conquered the world. Another opportunity of US is US, unlike the communist countries, unlike any other country in the world, they actually encourage foreigners, encourage foreign trade, encourage people from developing countries to come to US and do business. There are about 8 government organizations set up for that purpose. One of them was the one that Mr. Boyede mentioned, USAID. They even give grants for you to do some transactions where you are qualified. We have the Department of Commerce. We have the Department of State itself. We have a Department of Treasury. We have OPIC, which is Overseas Private Investment Corporation. Even the White House itself encourages trading with developing countries. You remember a couple of years back, we have the Obama program, DBIA, doing business in Africa. Now we have the Prosper Africa program, which is a program organized by a combination of these agencies to do business in Africa for developing countries. So the opportunities are there. The US government encourages foreign trade, encourages you to bring your products to US. These are opportunities that many other countries do not give to foreigners. Now, let's focus on one of these opportunities just for a minute. That's the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, AGOA, which many of us are familiar with, but which many are not using to the full. AGOA encourages imports of goods into the US duty-free. Not every product qualifies for this, of course, but a good number of products from Africa, from Sub-Sahara, qualify for AGOA, which means you can actually get your products, get it confirmed to be on the AGOA approval list, and export to US without paying any duties, which saves you significant amounts of money. It was recently renewed for another 5 years till 2025. So if you have not taken advantage of AGOA provisions, this is the time to do so. And that's why we have this mantra. US encourages you to trade with US. They don't want to just give handouts to you. So again, these opportunities we can take advantage of, and they cost nothing. All it requires is to have the information. Now, on this slide, you have the list of countries that are eligible for AGOA. If you look through the list, very likely your country of origin will be there. Number 31, Rwanda. There's a question mark in recent times. They're still sorting it out. But the point is, regardless of where you're in Africa, in most cases, you are qualified to take advantage of the AGOA provisions. Now, let's look briefly at the regulations and compliance imperatives. Let me say upfront that US is a country of law and order, and everything, literally everything is regulated, except for the air you are breathing in. Nearly everything is taxed. So let's look at some of these things. First of all, you are bringing your goods to the US. What is the path? The first thing you need to do, of course, you have to clear the US customs, like every other country. You have to clear the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, without detention, meaning your goods will qualify to sail through FDA clearance without being detained, without being returned to the country of origin. If you did in agri products, you also have to clear the part of FDA also controls that, and there's some certificates that you need to obtain before you can bring in agri products. There are many other agencies that have regulatory control over things that come to the US. The US government, the US agencies, the Border Control, CBP, Customs and Border Protection Units, their job is not to protect you. Their responsibility is to protect the US government, to protect the US territory, and to protect American citizens from things that might be harmful to them from abroad. So don't be surprised if they're very rigid about what you bring in. They're very rigid about the sanity of the goods you bring in, and they're very rigid about compliance issues. Now, FDA regulates everything that has to do with food and drugs. Food products have to be properly labeled, for instance, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. The case with many countries, some countries that will take almost anything in, does not arise in the US. On the next slide, you see an example of the FDA registration. So that even when you have facilities in US, FDA requires a visitation to those facilities at least once every year to make sure the products you have within the US comply with the CBP requirements. Now, this is about the nutritional facts. It's a requirement in US. If you bring in anything food and drug in, there must be a label that shows the nutritional information. How much dietary fiber, how much cholesterol, how much sodium, how much saturated fats. If the goods you bring in don't comply with the nutritional facts information or don't provide enough information to meet the requirements, those goods will be rejected and they will not be allowed to come into the US. There also has to be Food Safety Modernization Acts, which ensures that there are very minimal risk posed by food and agri products that come to the US. They maintain records, they maintain a database of information, and they can easily cross-check. If you come in 2 years ago and they come up with something differently this year, they can make a comparison and hold you responsible. Another one here is on the labeling, still on the labeling. There are some products that go through a two-stage exports process. They manufacture the products in one country, it's labeled in another country and packaged somewhere else. Now, it's required to actually include both information on the labeling, packed in Mexico, manufactured in Ghana, something like that. For all facilities that even operate within and outside the US, as we find out in the next slide, the US government has inspectors that check the facilities and make sure that from end to end, there's compliance with food safety requirements from food hazards and to meet the needs of the populace. They want to be able to trace the products that you are bringing in. If there's something that they found, they want to be able to hold somebody accountable. If your products are cosmetic products, for instance, and you have a laboratory, they will require, FDA will require to inspect the laboratory to make sure the facilities will not introduce some pathogens or dangerous chemicals to those products. We're talking about the food inspectorates we mentioned earlier on, and we have this in Nigeria also. You could easily call the US embassy, and they have a department there that could send inspectors before you ship the products to Nigeria. They will make sure it complies with the provisions and the high standards expected, which is a good thing, because it makes sense to inspect the product before you leave the country of origin than to go through the whole 9 years. You get to US and they say, no, it doesn't comply, and they send it back. Again, we need to take advantage of this. I think for the most part, it's at no cost. So it's actually beneficial to get our products to ship to US inspected before they are shipped. And this is another example of the health certificates. US allows importation of live animals and animal products. Now, both also require health certificates, particularly for the wildlife from the points of origin. We also have, which is very popular, Phytosanitary Certificates, which is required for all agri products. Some people will bring in some gari, some foodstuffs, some snails, some fish in their luggage. There's a question mark, and we need to check the ruling, the prevailing regulations at the time you bring them in. Sometimes if you go through the inspection at every airport in US, they might let you go if it doesn't constitute a health risk. But let me mention at this point that if you bring in some dry fish, some suya, and you put in your bag, your luggage, and you declare you have no animal products on the customs form, and they find out, it might be a lot of problem, and it will not be very pleasant. So please always declare clearly what you have at the point of entry. Now, this affects wildlife, zoo sanitary certificates. Again, this mostly for items that's live, that are not for human consumption, that will be used in the US, like guide dogs, like zoo animals, and things of that category. It is for the wildlife permits. Now, this is a little different. There's a permit for wildlife itself, but also for products derived from wildlife. And the popular smoked fish in Nigeria called suya is in this category. So if you're bringing in a large quantity of suya, even though it's not live animal, it requires a permit to bring them in. And this also requires, it's part of the, it's different from the Phytosanitary Certificates, but it's another permit required by USDA, which is the US Department Agency. Now, what do you need to clear at the customs? This is a very funny picture, but something always amuses me from this picture, and that's the last line. Anything to declare? If you notice, it doesn't say anything for the boys. They don't do anything for the boys in the US. It's anything to declare. What do you need to declare? It's actually everything. Everything you are bringing in must be declared, including currency, which is out of scope of this conversation. But everything needs to be declared as required by law. Failing to declare your products you are bringing into the US could carry severe penalty. And that's part of the clause. You do not lie to federal authorities. Lying to federal authorities is actually a contravention of the law, and it could carry jail term and fine, or combination of both. So there's no playing smart, there's no playing smart Alec when bringing the things to the US. Just straight up, be honest with what you have, what you are shipping in. Make sure the labeling is correct. Make sure the nutritional facts are accurate, and make sure it's just right. I mean, I remember there was a time I bought I went to an African country and I bought a medication, and that was this year. And it says on the label clearly, manufacture date, June 2022. Well, that's even the 2022 yet. So how can it be the manufacture dates? So that's obviously a lie they put on the nutritional label. For real. Like this, I actually kept that information with me. So you don't lie to federal authorities at all. It's a lot safer for you, a lot more healthy, and it costs you a lot less when you straight up tell them what you have. Now, in most parts of Africa, we have the customs agents. In US, we call them customs broker. The customs brokers must have the power of attorney from the exporter to fully represent them. And that's before they can even talk to the customs broker at all. Government wants to see that power of attorney. Again, it's a requirement. There are lots of other rules and regulations and compliance requirements that might not be covered in this period of time, but we encourage all listeners and all intending exporters to US to engage the services of a customs broker that will take them through this lengthy paperwork. You can't do it alone. We're not advised to do it alone. It just makes business sense to engage a customs broker to go to do this for you. Now, let's talk about some tips for entrepreneurs. Some of these are funny, some of these are unexpected, but there are different nuances for different countries. The way they greet in China is not the way they greet in US. So a lot of times when you flow with the local nuance, you have a better chance at winning the business. Let's look at some of them. First of all, let's take a step back. If you are bringing your products to US or you want to do business with US, you have to make some decisions at the very beginning. Are you going to do this by yourself? Are you going to have an agency represent you in the US? Are you going to have distributorship? Are you having a joint venture? Would you do a direct sale to the US? This will determine your modus operandi. We also determine the success of otherwise of your venture. I will closely dictate the success rates and the glitches that you might acquire. Now, there are a few hints here on how you can get the most knowledge and the most about US businesses. One is to encourage trade shows, like the seminar we're going through now. You know, no information is lost. The biggest tool you're going to have in your hand to do business in the US, or as a matter of fact, any other country for that matter, is knowledge. You need information. And that's information you get from a trade program like this, from trade missions organized to US, where you meet some major corporations and opticals in person. And this oftentimes will even give you a new sense of direction. Maybe all along you thought you could do it alone, and somebody somewhere you meet on a trade mission or on a program like this says, you know what, I have the market for your products. I'll buy everything from you. It changes the whole game. So make yourself available to get as much information as you can. Understand the US market very well. And lastly, don't forget your own network. It's like looking for a job. You could go online to monster.com in those days, apply for jobs, but it's a lot easier when you know someone that knows someone that knows someone there that could give you the lead that you need. And that's one of the benefits of social networking. Now, let's look at some of these steps you need to take. First of all, the business you want to do in US, whatever company you are dealing with in US, is doing a background check on you. They don't know you. You also have a responsibility to do due diligence on the companies you are dealing with in US. The United States of America is not heaven, even though it's called God's own country, but there are still a number of quacks and fake businesses and people that can dupe you in US like any other country. So you have a responsibility to do a due diligence on the companies. Unfortunately, like the first point I mentioned, the US doesn't have a central federal database of businesses. Each state in the US is almost autonomous in their regulatory path. Each state has its own Supreme Court, like many countries in Africa. So most companies, not even most companies, most companies register with their states. So one, there's no federal database. Two, most states have the registration portal. And is most of the time the registration information is public information. Whatever is not public, you can purchase from the Department of State, not from the Secretary of State's office, which in most states regulates company registration and corporation developments. Then we have some independent organizations like the Bureau, Better Business Bureau. They kind of rate companies based on the level of complaints they get from them about them and based on how they do business. So usually they are rated A to F. So we encourage you to do businesses with companies that are A or A plus rated, because now you have a better chance they would not likely default in their commitment to you. Now, still on due diligence, we have two organizations in the US that have the massive amounts of database about US companies. The first and the most popular is Dun and Bradstreet. As a matter of fact, if you are doing business with government in the US, you're required to have a number they call DUNS number. And this DUNS number is like the unique identifier of every business in the US. So if you go to the Dun and Bradstreet's website, you can have lots of information about several companies, where they are registered, how they do business, who they do business with, their officers there. But BBB gives you the rating, a measure of the feedback about that company. Another one is the Overs, also has a huge database. They don't have as much as Dun and Bradstreet, but definitely by the time you do your research about these companies in these two databases, then you'll have a fairly reasonable information before you part with millions of dollars in business dealings. Now, let's go to these tips. First of all, America is a great country. America has its own peculiarities. I'll take one of them. Time is of essence in the US. And most workers they will not bend backwards to place you. They respect timelines. So they say the timeline to submit this tender is February 5. By 5 p.m. February 5, the door closes. There's no begging. Please, my child was sick. That's why I couldn't submit. No, they're very rigid about their timing. And US, they keep strictly within their confines. So if a business closes at 5 p.m., get there at 5 p.m. It's customary in many countries of the world. People hug, they exchange handshake, they pat each other at the back. It's not very common in US. Most American businessmen and women refrain from huggings, close physical contact. A handshake, not beyond the elbow, is just about enough for most American businessmen and women. If you go beyond that, it's considered, what is the word? You are encroaching on their space, and they don't like that. Now, Americans love sports, so most of their business interactions, they use sport language, like touch base with you. I'm going to call the shots, give us the ballpark figure, game plan. Again, this doesn't mean, since these are sometimes you need to learn. Most of them don't open on Sundays. Most of them will accept food from you. But if you are good, if an American businessman invites you to their house and you just are not in the mood for the food you're eating, it's perfectly acceptable to refuse the food. Unlike in many African countries, it's considered disrespectful. American doesn't like the food, they don't like the food, period. Now, they also don't appreciate, essentially, it's not against the law, but it's frowned at. It's considered perversion of justice if you give gifts to your businessman before the business is closed, because it's assumed it will influence the decision-making and might make it favorable for you. So normally you give gifts after the business is done, not before, not after. A couple of years back, a federal secretary, what we call the minister in other countries, was given a gift of wristwatch by somebody was dealing with. He lost the job because the government says accepting a gift of a wristwatch will affect his judgments in making decisions. Of course, you don't give perfumes to women, whether it doesn't matter how much business you have together, it's considered inappropriate. It's a personal nature. Usually we give gifts that are completely non-emotional, whatsoever. What other things again? Oh yeah, business cards. In many parts of Africa, people meet and you exchange business cards. Most Americans don't deal with business cards. If you give them the business card, they will take it, but they might not give you one back because they might not even have one. Some businesses like banking facilities have regular business cards. The salespeople have business cards, but the CEOs, the general managers, most of them don't care about business card. So if you give them a card, they don't give you one back, don't take it personal. It's just the way they are. And like I mentioned, time is money. There's no African time in doing business with US. A few years back, we had a governor come to US to give a presentation in Atlanta here. I was there. We invited him. And it was scheduled to be at 10 o'clock in the morning. So at 10 minutes to 10, the governor of Georgia was already there. Everybody was seated. And the governor, and I called my own governor from Nigeria. Sir, the guests are waiting for you. He said, what time is it? I said, it's 10 minutes to 10, sir. Are they there? I said, yes, sir. Okay, let me go and take my bath. They don't do that. So, and of course, needless to say, the governor, everybody else walked away. By the time our governor got there, everybody was gone. And he was angry. Why didn't they wait for me? They don't wait. Time is money. If you give a businessman appointment for 10 p.m., by all means, please be there at 10 p.m. because that's the culture. And also, Americans don't like too much silence when they're having a business meeting. Again, there are some gatherings where people meet together and there is such a moment of silence, you could almost use a knife to cut through the silence. American is so fast-paced. Anyway, so that's some of the tips. Again, like Mr. Boyede will probably share this with you after the meeting. For general information, you could look at the ustr.gov website with the US Trade Departments. We also have the Border Control CBP website. They can give you some additional information. On the US tariff, which again changes constantly, we have to check with the customs broker that you nominate or check on the website to find out about the current tariff. So these are, in a nutshell, some of the things I'd like to share with you. We cannot share everything in 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but as you begin to do business with the US, you realize the benefits are there. So again, we encourage everybody who has not done so. The US has opportunities. You can't go wrong with doing business in the US. There is always markets for almost anything. You can sell almost anything in the US. If you just do your search, there's a market for it. And the US encourages you to do business with America. So nothing is holding you back. There are many government provisions, many government agencies that are set up primarily to help you do business with the US. And the regulations are strict. Some products are sent back because they don't meet the regulations, not because they don't like you, it's just because you are not in compliance. Again, we need to be in compliance with the law so our products don't get sent back. I've seen a situation where someone exported, I think it was cashew nuts to US, but then they find a quarter of the cashew nut package was full of stones that look like cashew nuts. You cannot do that exporting to US. We're asking for cashew nuts, not cashew stone nuts. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to share some of these hits with you. And I want to assure you that you have a very good success rate doing business with the US, and congratulations in advance of your success. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyede. I will yield back to you.
Oh my God. Thank you, Engineer Olowokere. Everyone would agree with me. This is one of the best that we have ever had. You know why? Because we broke it down. Even the layman on the street can understand everything. You have made it so simple. You have simplified it. Thank you so very much. So we'll be going to the, does Mr. Boyede have anything to say before we go to question and answer session? There will be questions, there will be comments on what you have just presented. Thank you, engineer. Mr. Boyede.
No, I don't have anything at this point more than to thank my brother, Engineer Olowokere, for, the cool composure to talk through a 2-3 hour presentation in just such brief a moment. Thank you so much. And I can see that there's so many comments and stuff already. So please, Lady K.
Okay.